Danny Black.
And I'm John Newman.
Welcome to Card Mensches.
Hi, and welcome to episode 2 of Card Mensches. You might notice there's 3 boxes on the screen today. That makes you an advanced hobbyist, and we appreciate you joining us. On episode 2 today, we would like to welcome our newest sponsor, Center Stage, and welcome Waxstat.com and SGC Grading for their support as well. We got a great response from episode 1, and we are really thrilled, and that's a format we're going to traditionally have, but we're lucky today to have a special guest, and I'm going to let John Newman introduce a hobby icon, as you can see, Dr. Beckett. John, Dr. Beckett, welcome to the show.
As I always say, he's a man that needs no introduction, but like you said, hobby icon, hobby legend, and better yet, just a great person, and happy Dr. Jim's joining us today. Little different episode, like Danny said. Normally we don't have 3 people, but we will have occasional guests. But the only rule is they have to be a Mensch, and Dr. Jim definitely checks all those boxes. And he's been gracious to come on in episode 2, not even knowing where the show may go, taking a leap of faith there. But he's, something I'm excited to talk. I've talked to Dr. Jim. Danny's conversated with him. But today we're going to talk about, the sale of his company back in 2005. And he's allowed us to ask questions and get some of those details. I know I'll find it interesting. I know Danny won't. I got a feeling a lot of you out there as well, because that company, started by Dr. Jim, built by Dr. Jim, and you can't say hobby without saying Beckett. Regardless of when you got in the hobby, they're sort of synonymous with each other.
Absolutely. And Dr. Beckett, thank you for coming on. Thank you for agreeing to the terms of this interview, and further publication rights have been negotiated. And I think the important thing that a lot of people don't know is we're actually coming up on an anniversary. So it gives us an opportunity to, I think, delve into something that has never really been talked about, just because the hobby's moved in so many different ways. We don't often take a chance to step back and look, but we are coming up on January 26th, depending on when you listen to this, will be the 18th anniversary of you actually selling Beckett. Do I have that date correct? Okay. So you started Beckett in 1984, and I guess we really want to understand what happened in 84 to get you to start it, but more importantly, what happened in 05 or 04, I guess, when the process would start, and how that transition works. So I'm going to let John lead off here and let him take it for a minute.
Well, I mean, obviously the sale was 2005, but I guess my first question, Dr. Jim, is almost a 2-pronged question. Like, when did maybe the thought of selling the company you built, when did that, really first enter the equation for you? And that being said, how long of a process once you determined, that was something you were going to do? How long, we hear, in today's news cycle, just kind of announcements made, but how long behind the scenes did the process take?
Well, a couple of key dates. One, the Parsippany National that was in 84, or probably early August, late July, is when kind of the company got launched. I mean, I had some thought, and I really decided at that to go forward. I talked to a lot of people, and I actually printed up some forms at the show, at a printing place near the show, passed them out. So that was really the launch there. The next date when I started thinking about selling the company was October 6th, 1996, when I was in the hospital with a heart attack. And, all bets are off, guys. When you're, you just think up to that point, I'm sure I thought I was bulletproof like everybody else, and I was going to live forever, happily ever after. But life is more complicated than that. And so I'm in the hospital for about a week, recuperating from I'm very fortunate to be alive, very blessed to be alive. And so you're thinking, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And I was working really hard. And, guys, it just 9 years later, approximately, or 8.5 years later, I guess, the company was sold. It was put up for sale probably about a year before it sold. We kind of engaged an investment banker that handled a lot of publishing things. I had known the guy from some other things, so good reputation. It was out of New York City, a sharp guy that had a lot of contact. And, so the process took a while. I was really pleased that the leadership of my company kind of kept it under wrap, because as you guys know, and for people in the industry, if there would have been a buzz for a year that we were for sale, or that I was going to entertain offers even, it would have been a lot of confusion. So it was kind of on a need-to-know basis for the key people in the company. And they just were awesome.
Was there a precipitous in 2004 that you said this is finally the right time?
No, I mean, I work backwards, Danny. I don't think, is this the right time? I think as soon as I thought, I'm not going to go to my grave owning this company, not figuratively or literally, but I thought, eventually I'm not. It's going to be eventually time for somebody to take me out and give me my life back. That I was really pretty much a slave to my work for many of those years. And so as soon as I came up with the thought that I am eventually going to sell it, because I'd never thought I would ever sell it. Then the question was when, and then I think, well, why don't I wait till I'm 80 years old? I thought, well, gee, I'll do a lot of traveling after I'm 80. Well, that doesn't work either. So, well, how about 75? Yeah, I've seen some guys traveling in 75, but there's no sure things there either. How about 70? So I started backing up, and until finally in 2004, I said, how about now? As soon as you kind of make an emotional break that you're eventually going to sell it, then I felt like I was probably not doing a very good job as a CEO, because I wasn't excited about the future. I was thinking about what the future would be like with me not being there, and the company and my teammates deserved somebody that was full speed ahead, rainmaking for our company and for the industry. And when I didn't have that same drive for that. It's time to pick. Time to find somebody else, and that was going to free up some of the people in the company to be the best they can be too. Because if I wasn't there, they really rose to the occasion. I wouldn't have been a good absentee boss. I couldn't say, hey, I'm going to bring in somebody to run the company, and I'm going to go to some vacation for 6 months a year. That's not my style. I've either got to be all in or not. And when I decided I wasn't going to be all in forever, it was just a matter of time. And I suppose if we'd had a failed process that no bidders came up that wanted to pay a good price, I would have. I wasn't going to sell it cheaply. I got a decent price, but it would have been more if I'd have sold earlier. Maybe it would have been less if I'd have sold 5 years later, because things weren't so great, in the late 2000s. So I don't lose any sleep over it. It was time. Again, it was a pleasant transaction with guys that I kind of enjoyed. I enjoyed the successor CEO. He was a friend of a friend at first, and then became a good friend of mine. So it worked out well, guys.
Did you find it hard to run the company in 2004 at the same time you were trying, going through the sale? Did it put pressure financially, on the books differently? Did it affect you differently in your focus?
Well, when you're a CEO, it means you're the chief executive officer. And frequently in a larger company, there can be other presidents underneath the CEO or other operating managing partners. And I was probably in my peak, I was very hands-on. And toward the end there, I wasn't. And so, but I was there. And so I had some presidents in my company that were in charge of certain things. They were really sharp. And I think I was just a long shadow. And so for me to step out and say, you know what, you're going to be working for the new entity. And it kind of took the brakes off. I was a driver, but I was also the brakes on when we had these crazy ideas, I was the one that selected which crazy idea we were going to do and which crazy idea we weren't going to do. But some of the people, they thought no ideas were crazy. And some of them were. So I needed to step aside, guys.
So in 96, you had the heart attack that definitely shook you, and obviously is a serious thing. It almost cost your life. So you worked, in a sense, eight more years, 8+ years. Did you change after the heart attack and knowing you were, think maybe, there's going to be life after your company? What kind of changes did you make personally to be healthier, to be, that balance between work and life?
Let's see. I took the fun out of my job after my heart attack because I no longer, and this was in the works, but I no longer did pricing. So I was never handling the cards. I did almost no show travel after that because I wasn't doing the monthly magazines and even the annual books. And so that was all delegated to other people who stepped up. But that was the fun that I really enjoyed, and it kept me close to the action. And so I felt like I was an executive, and I don't like being an executive. I don't mind being a team leader, but I don't really want to be isolated. And I felt like I was getting increasingly isolated. And so I wasn't as tuned into the industry. I'm more tuned in now than I was in 2004, I think. And that's bad because if you're that's why, and you guys have said this, any CEO of a hobby entity that's not really tuned into the hobby and doesn't really have a passion and understand collecting, that's a problem waiting to happen unless they get up to speed pretty quick or have very, very trusted lieutenants that really help them.
Did you feel you needed to recharge your hobby batteries? Was there almost a stepping away? I mean, I know you took a title with the new company, but how active were you?
If I'd had my druthers, I would have delegated the executive stuff and kept the pricing. But it didn't make sense. It didn't. I mean, it's just nobody would say, hey, that's the right thing to do, because the pricing, those were the all-nighters. Those were the long hours when you're under deadline pressure. So I made the right decision, and even the right decision. I don't lose sleep over selling. When I did or if I did, it was the right thing to do.
Well, I was going to ask you, Dr. Jim, you sort of answered it there with your response. When, so now the sales and the process, I mean, was there any tug of war in your own mind? Like, am I really doing this? Or even, you don't have to mention names, were there people in the company that were maybe, hey, Dr. Jim, you sure you want to do this? You're this important to this company. We don't want to see you, you do this. Did you have those sort of internal, did those conversations happen even with your own self?
Well, two things. One is that, my leadership team had been there for a long time. So almost all of them had been there since before my heart attack. One of the presidents was my sister, my little sister. Okay. And the others were very, very close friends who really knew me and cared for me and all that stuff. And so they weren't trying to talk me out of it. However, fast forward a few years, and I've had several people say, we want you back. Why don't you buy the company back? And I said, well, guys, I'd like to help the new owners, but it's deja vu. I've been there, done that, and I don't want to do it again because the new owners. So I think you could get it cheaper than what you could make money on it when it was at a low point, and now it's back up. But no, I had my day in the sun, and now I can experience the hobby with more flexibility. Do it the way I can hobby the way I want to hobby instead of the way I have to do it.
I think back in 2005, closings were still done in person. Were you in person for the actual closing of the sale?
Actually, no. We were up in a big high floor of a big law firm with one of my close friends is a outstanding attorney that does deals way bigger than ours. But he really walked me through it, predicted everything that would happen, and it had a little hiccup at the end, but nothing that we couldn't push through. And so it was relatively uneventful. So it was supposed to close on the 25th, and I think it closed on the 26th, which is not bad.
Do you remember that day?
Yeah. I didn't do anything crazy.
I mean, were you waiting for a call? Was there a moment where you got the call, it's done, or?
Well, it's the call that the money has landed.
Yes. Yes.
But it wasn't. But even then, I had it was complicated. I had a bonus structure for when the money came in. There, my last act was going to be given bonuses to out of the price to the every employee, not just the key employee. Key employees got a lot more, but and it was my going away present. And then I still had plenty. I'm very blessed financially. I worked hard, but I've really been blessed. But
Dr. Jim, I know I know you said you were sort of, you were at that spot where you knew this was what you wanted to do. With any trepidation, though, again, this is your baby, this is your company you built from the ground up. In 21 years worth of work. Was there, I guess, two-pronged question, was there any trepidation for that? Like, where's this new company going to take my old company after I sell? And was there any stipulations that you can talk about? I understand if you can't, but stuff like you wanted to make sure happened if you were going to sell.
I had some great ideas of things like that, John. And my attorney, who has known me for a really long time, since college, basically, who's outstanding, really top notch. He said, "You're just gonna muck it up. So you can't add all these conditions. We've narrowed it down to this. They really want it. They have a publishing background, which turned out not to be an advantage because they were from New York and they thought we'll just do it the New York way. And they really didn't do very well because publishing was changing and they were too old school then. And the other thing my friends told me, my other guys who were running companies that had sold companies for, they said, you may be able to control who you sell it to, but you can't control who they sell it. And sure enough, after 4 or 5 years, the first group sold it to the second group, which was completely different and very much digital, publishing oriented and database oriented. And so they immediately offshored everything that they could and drove down the costs and moved as much as possible toward digital and away from print. And that increased the profitability, but it wound up eliminating a lot of employees that were my friend. But again, that wasn't the people I sold to. It was the people that they sold.
Well, you mentioned you sold to what was Beckett Media, and they were a publishing company. And, one of the things I found fascinating was you were basically selling a publishing company. Was that the idea of the transaction? How much was the online or the grading even considered in the sale because a publishing company bought you?
I think they didn't understand it, but they could see that it was a revenue. It was producing earnings. It was profitable. We had, I think I've mentioned this before, is that we had interest from eBay and Yahoo and Amazon to buy not our company, but to buy the digital aspects. They did not want print, but they wanted anything that would be, virtual. And I wasn't willing to consider it. I thought that would be really tricky to kind of split the company in half and all that. So I didn't do that. In fact, they may have paid more for that aspect than for the whole company. So I'd already been through that exercise. And then when this company came up, this prize came up, they offered more than the other guys did. And they had the publishing background, but I think they stuck too close to the doing publishing the way people do it in New York, which they thought, what do these guys in Dallas know? New York is the capital of publishing, and we'll bring our expertise to it and we'll improve whatever. And they increased costs, and they didn't understand the hobby. Our main accounts were the local card shops. Those were our most profitable accounts.
Well, wasn't their business model to buy publications in different niche markets, so they weren't an expert in any one specifically?
Well, no, they actually kind of built on our reputation to add other what they called enthusiast publication, where people were passionate, and if they would, the twist on it, what they didn't realize is they were on the right track, except it didn't need to be enthusiast publications. It needed to be enthusiast communities that can be digital, virtual, or trade shows, or getting together in person, whatever. But it's the people. Somebody said that the hobby is the people and the business is the people. And so I think they thought the business was the pages, were the magazines, and the magazines, were our peak years were the junk wax era and before the baseball strike. The early 90s were our best year.
You mentioned, a prize wound up selling themselves to another company in 2008. You mentioned that, people did come to you and said, hey, you should buy him, Dr. Jim, and get back. Was there any thought, did the light bulb go on at all, or were you pretty much like, no, I've turned that page? Did you consider it at all?
I did not consider it, and I kind of shot it down pretty quick. I mean, I didn't need to be. I wouldn't be upsetting the employees, but I didn't want to give them a false hope. I didn't want to get in a bidding war. I didn't want to buy it for cheap. I didn't want to buy it for expensive. I just thought, I've moved on. And, like I say, I'm happy to be a pro bono consultant. That's really what I enjoy doing. My skin in the game is that this company has my name on it, and I want them to do well, but I'm not willing to burn midnight oil anymore. And so when I just have a high responsibility quotient. And if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And I don't need to be saying I'm going to do it.
At what point did you realize your name was going to be a part of the deal? And was that hard to accept?
I realize now that I think I understood it, but that was one of the things that John mentioned, is that I should have gotten some kind of but additional price or considerations. The fact that one of the biggest things they wanted was the name. And so I'm not allowed to use my name unmodified. I can be my personal name. That's why I can't be Beckett Sports Card Insights. Because that would be an infringement, because then it would be unclear whether it came from the company or came from me. That's why I'm Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights. So I only have certain ways that I can use my own name. And if I would have, I could have renegotiated that to say, look, if you're going to use my name, I'm going to want like a royalty, and I floated that. And my attorney friend said, you're just going to muck up the deal. They're just going to freak out if you say that. I said, but it's true. And he said, well, they'll just change the name. I said, actually, they probably will not change the name.
Going back to 2008 again, like you said, you were pretty much new, you weren't, going to come back but had you wanted to, let's hypothetically, if you said, you know what, I missed it. It's been 3-4 years, would have you had an advantage? Let's say you wanted to buy your company back, being the originator. Do you think that would have given you any kind of advantage if that was actually the case?
Well, I could have been part of a team. I could have been a consultant to the new owners, which, I didn't really know the new owners, and they got it at a lower point. But I wasn't willing to it needed fixing. And frankly, guys, remember the economy was messed up then. The economy needed fixing. Yeah. Things were bad. The hobby wasn't doing great. The economy wasn't doing great. And so for me to jump back in there, I was moving toward greater simplification of my life, and that would be in a diametrically opposed to that, because I cared, and I cared too much. So once I got in there, and if I invested, take the money that I got, put it back in, I could have done that, but I wanted to shoot that down so that the people didn't have false hope. And yet I wanted to tell them, hey, if you got a problem, I'll help you think through it, and I give you free advice, and I'll come down there every once in a while and stuff like that. But I don't want to be on the hot seat anymore.
I always wondered, do you have days where you're like, I cannot believe my name is on that comment or that statement? I mean, even to this day, do they do things and you wish your name wasn't tied to it, or are there days where you're glad your name's tied to it, or has it just become separate?
Let me answer that in a more general way, because number one, I'm not scanning all their statements to see if they've misstated something. But I will say this: I think I really had a strong desire to be a market leader, to be a pace setter, to be a thought leader for our industry. And I think over the last 18 years almost now, coming up, I think our company's lost some of that, and other people have. It's just I just don't think we weren't hitting on all cylinders. Now I'm hopeful that there's new leadership now and that it's going to get back on track. So that's my frustration, Danny. I see that it's not what it could be or even what it was, and I'm hoping now it's going to be even better. It doesn't have to be what I think it, but they have not. I mean, they were right up there with PSA. If you look, 15 years ago, or probably when I was there, we were winning the awards for best grading. SGC was an afterthought. Was just mainly doing vintage, and then now over the last few years, it's not been that great. And I think the other thing, gosh, I guess I could say this. I think some of it are self-inflicted wounds. Not me inflicting the wounds, not you guys inflicting the wounds, but and I think what happens in any company when you're having a mixed market like we've had is that it's hard for the owner, for the manager, for the money person to think, I need to double down. I need to reinvest in the category because it's getting ready to take off. And sometimes ownership is more conservative. No, we're making good money. Let's just keep it coming instead of reinvesting in the category. That's something I did because I was 100% owner. So if the company needed money, I could just put money in. And so if we say, well, that's not in our budget. Well, it's not about the budget if this is something that's good for the hobby and is eventually going to be good for everybody. And so we did a bunch of new things that were not in the budget because I thought this is a great idea. We need to do it. Well, the budget calls for it next year. I said, wait a minute, the window's wide open right now. Let's do it. So we did it and capitalized on that. And I think that's, so not that I'm a big wildcat or anything, because I'm a pretty reasoned guy, but I think it got more corporate with budgets for some of those years, and they were managing it like an established company. And I always wanted us to think small and very entrepreneurial and disruptive, to do things that hadn't been done. And so I don't want to be a follower. I wanted to be a leader. And now BGS, that was a real leader. I don't know if we ever had more cards being graded than PSA, but we were, and now we're just, we're not considered right up there with PSA. And that makes me sad. And I'm hopeful. I've thrown some ideas to Jeremy and the other guys of, here's some ideas I have for how we could recapture our, in a lot of these areas. I'm an idea guy.
Going back to the sale, Apprise Media purchases your company. What was your role in the 3 or 4 years with them? If after that sale, were you still involved? Did they pick your brain? Did they, coming into your company as new? You know what I mean? It's their company now, but it's your company you built. Did they ask you for some help or for some consultation? What was your role there?
They didn't, but Peter did, the new CEO, but he had to be sly about it. It couldn't look like I was the shadow CEO or that, he would come up to I still officed in the building for the first couple of years, and I was getting paid. I had a non-compete where I was there and I was getting paid, not full salary, but I was getting enough that, that kind of helps the enforcement of an
NDA.
Yeah. So I wasn't going to compete anyway. But so Peter would come up to my office after hours when nobody was looking. He wasn't going to bring me in on some meetings. He was the boss. And I respected that. I wasn't going to trot down to his office and say, hey, I got a problem with this. No, he needed to run the company, and he did a really good job. The people liked him. In no way was I going to undermine. But every once in a while, he'd kind of just ask me hey, why is this happening? Or I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? But he didn't want people to see that he was not the authority. It would have undermined his authority. So, and I respected that. And like I said, I had some mutual friends. He was highly regarded, and it wasn't his fault. I think his bosses that had the money did not see the long-term vision.
How about with the next sale to the next enterprise? Did it change then? Even more so for you?
I think it changed more, yeah, because that was like I said, a different kind of ownership. Somebody that was very acquisitive, that had a lot of companies and loved the transactions, loved that, and then would bring in management, that didn't necessarily have a hobby background. They'd bring in outside management, and I would, guys, I was almost always a promote from within guy. I just thought if I can find somebody that really understands. You can train them if there's something they don't know, you could train them, but you already know it's a good person, they're sharp, and they know the people. And so as much as possible, I tried to hire from or promote from within. But the new guy didn't, and then they bolted on some other things that were these other, like Danny was saying, some other enthusiast publications and things. And then they titled them Beckett something, even though they weren't anything I'd ever touched. And that's, again, their prerogative, but kind of dilutes it a little bit, I think.
I've got a couple of questions touching on that. First of all, you had, was it 9, 11, 20? How many publications when you sold it the first time?
Something like that.
Yeah. My question was going to be, I'm not going to ask you to, how many of those, could you name today?
Well, the problem was I was never, it's not that I wasn't a fan of Pokemon, and Yu-Gi-Oh and Digimon and Neopets and all those kind of things. It just wasn't my thing. So I was baseball, football, hockey, NASCAR, Future Stars, which we had, Vintage, which we had, and then we had, the larger versions of them all. So we had a lot of periodicals, a lot of books, the Beckett Sports Heroes, the different things we did. So
that's why I was curious. Did you look at yourself as a technology company at a certain point, or a grading company, and said, the publishing?
No, we never looked at ourselves as a grading company, but I think we looked at ourselves as an innovative company. And so grading was one of those innovations. Some of these other sports biographies that we did were very interesting, and nobody thought we could do that. We had online auctions. I think maybe before eBay. It's just, like I said, I was the holdup. I didn't say, hey, we're going to bet the farm that there's something. eBay just doubled down on that. And I just thought, the auctions that we had were kind of specialty. And then we did our marketplace and all that stuff. So we were ahead of our time, but I never fully promoted it to be all in, to where I would take the profits from the print and pour it over into this other thing that was not making money yet, but would have done great. So
when you were the CEO, Dr. Jim, like how many hours a day were you involved with the company at like your peak when you were, which was probably right till the sale, up until the sale, I'm guessing?
No, I mean, before my heart attack, I had lots of weeks I worked 100 hours. Just was ridiculous. When I was on deadline, when I was doing books and magazines, and I was the guy doing all those books. I was the one doing it. So that's why I had a heart attack, a big reason. And so after my heart attack, I worked 50 hours a week probably, and then probably 40 in the 2000s. So I wasn't, and again, I hated it because I like to work a lot. I like to work hard, but again, if I'd worked more, it would have been undermining the leadership who were in charge of those things, just like the price guide guys. If I'd looked over their shoulder, that would not have been helpful, because after I withdrew kind of and kicked myself upstairs, those guys were really sharp. And so for me to be sharpshooting them and say, hey, what about that? Did you do the research on that or something? That would have been not helpful. And it would have been hurtful.
What I got to ask this. It's kind of a weird question, but just how my mind works. So the first day after the sale is transacted, the first what would have been a work day under, with you CEO, what was that like waking up that day? And the difference, now it's not your company.
Well,
I remember
I did wake up and I went to the office. I mean, I didn't play hooky. I mean, I was paid in my non-compete, and I wasn't necessarily getting paid to show up, but I thought, they're paying me, I should show up, and I'm available. And that first day, first week, first month, whatever, people were coming in and wanting to check in on me and stuff like that, because I had my same big office in the corner, and so everybody knew where I was. And I was still doing, we had a reasonably social company where we had a big lunchroom, and we had a basketball court, and, so people congregated around other things. So I was there, but, I tried to make sure everybody knew I was, I'm not the owner anymore, and I'm not the boss anymore. But I want to be helpful to my friends. I want to be helpful to the brand. But I can't insert myself into it, John, or that would have been, it just wouldn't have been right. Now, I'm sure they weren't going to kick me out. And then after almost 2 years, we were in the same building, and then the building got sold, and they moved to the other office. And I made the decision, even though they said, you want to get an office in our new place that we're going to? I said, no, it's time for me to. So a buddy and me, we got an office suite with some other guys. So we had our own office, and my secretary Carol went with us. And so I created a boardroom and some offices, and had a nice office. And then 10 years ago, I moved home, and I have my man cave here. So pretty retired.
Looking back, would you have done anything differently on the timeline of the sale, or how you prioritized the parts of the sale?
No, I think the main thing I would have done is in the 11th hour, when they tried to lower the price, I said, if you lower the price 10%, that's fine with me. I'll just keep 10% of the company. If you lower the price 20%, that's fine with me. I'll just keep 20% of the company. They said, wait a minute, that's not going to work. We want to pay you less. I said, yeah, you pay less, you're going to get less. And so they didn't want to go that way. But now looking back, if I'd kept some interest in it or kept some royalty interest in the fact that they were using my name for these other things, that would have been, but again, like I said, I had absolutely a top-notch advisor, in the sale. This guy's just brilliant. One of my close friends. I totally trust him. And he said, don't mess it up. That's, it's going to make you, it's going to make you look bad. They said, hey, I'm going to sell the company, but I want to keep the rights to my name. And every time you use my name, you got to give me a nickel. It didn't sound right. And guys, I would not be a Mensch if I did that.
Ooh, he pulled it. Yeah. There goes my follow-up question. Newman, back to you.
Well, I was going to, you mentioned how Peter was still, behind the scenes kind of picking your brain or
very rarely, John. I don't want to overrepresent that.
Okay.
Very rarely. But I saw him socially. We were in some of the same business organizations. And so I would see him and we'd talk about stuff. And I just say, if there's any way I can help, I'm happy to. But I never went to his office and shut the door and said, what are you doing? I never did that. So he was a class guy.
And like you said, you're in the build, but did you see a lot of like your former employees and friends and like you call them teammates where you get a lot of feedback?
Sports. We were playing basketball.
Yeah. Did you get a lot of like, I'm sure you did. We miss yous, or were they concerned with, new leadership or where the company was going after the sale? Was there from them themselves? Did they sort of, posture that way to you that they were concerned?
Well, I would have nipped that in the bud. I don't even think that really happened. I mean, basically, that's just not good. This was the new reality, and the best way they could honor me would be to work hard for the new entity. I mean, that's the brand that they. I mean, again, like I say, guys, I could have died in '96, and then there would have been new ownership in that sense, whether it had been my family estate or something. But there would have been new leadership, a new CEO, and a new ownership structure. And so that was weird. Talk about coming back to work. After I came back to work after being out for my heart attack, that was surreal.
How much time were you out?
I think I took a month off. I mean, I just really was. I'd been out, so I know that I lost blood, but I was in the hospital for a week, and so you have a lot of atrophy of just you're not. They get you moving around, but you're like walking around the hall for 10 minutes. Well, that's enough exercise for today. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, I didn't lose that much weight because I weighed the same as I weigh now when I had my heart attack. So I wasn't overweight, but but you spend a week in the hospital. Hospital's not a good place to stay. It's not like a hotel.
It's not a Miles.
Not healthy. So I stayed home for a while and then again, I had 3 presidents. So they just did what they did, and they were really sharp.
How difficult was it, like knowing you had to cut back your schedule, stress, and for your health wise and longevity wise? How difficult was that to do? Being, I'll say it, a workaholic. It sounds like how difficult having that mindset, like I'm a doer. But now I have to do less. I have to
No, I don't
myself.
have to. No, I don't have to. I didn't feel compelled to do that. I thought it's the right thing to do. And so, but I go on the treadmill every day now. So that's maybe an hour when you add it all up with the treadmill and stretching and stuff like that. I probably spent an hour a day that before my heart attack, it would have been working for that hour. I wouldn't have wanted to lose the hour. If I talk about sharpening the saw, so I sleep an extra hour, or I did. So, I mean, I made choices, John. And I think it's like people need to make choices. Say, this is going to be my new reality. But if the doctor made me do it, then it's not me doing it. It's me kind of being somebody's forcing me to do it. I saw the wisdom in what I was doing was not good for me, and what I was moving toward was greater health. And that's emotional health, physical health, psychological health, getting more sleep, exercising more aerobically. I was playing basketball, but I could have been Pete Maravich in the part where he died on the court.
I was about to say that was very humble on your ball handling.
Not averaging, leading the nation in scoring. But
Dr. Beckett, we're glad, number one, that you're still with us.
Yeah.
Number two, happy anniversary. Coming up from the time we're recording this, and we made you a deal to get you out on time. So I'm going to step in and say thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us, Mr. Newman. Anything you want to add?
I just, I know Dr. Jim's great with dates, better than even I am. Like you mentioned January 26th is the anniversary of the sale, and this year, like you said, it'd be 18 years. Do you do any weird question? Do you do anything on that day particularly, or you just know it's the anniversary of the sale?
I'm not a big celebrator. Basically, I don't know what I would do. I mean, I just wake up and do the same thing, and it's not. No
glass of wine with breakfast
or lunch even. Yes. So I don't think I'm sure I had a celebration. We had a big party after the closing, after the smoke had cleared, and maybe the first year there was some commemoration, but again, you can commemorate with your family, but I can't commemorate with my business family because they're working for the new dude. They've got a new structure. And so I'm past tense for them. And so if it looks like I'm having a lot of influence, I needed to just let it happen. But again, after 18 years, like I said, I'm happy to help, but they need to make the call.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned being past tense to them. You're present tense to the hobby, thankfully. And like Danny said, we're glad you're obviously still here, and just so important to the hobby then and still now with your own show and Sports Card Insights, and sharing a lot of those stories from those days and since then as well. So I just want to add that. I want to thank you for sharing some of this stuff. I know, some people maybe not as open with certain things like that yet. You came on and I even asked you anything off limits. You said nope. Ask what you want. So,
John,
I appreciate that.
Let me say one thing publicly that I just to
Sure.
affirm this, and that is that over the last few years, especially since I've been doing the podcast, but even before that, I've had, I think, some fabulous ideas. I've had a bunch of ideas, and a lot of them I put on the podcast. But my best ideas I have not put on the podcast. I go to Jeremy or Bill or one of the hobby leadership guys at the company, and my other friends, my confidants, say, "Well, you should just do that yourself. You don't have any statute of limitations. You could just do it." I said, "No, this is something my old company ought to do. I'd really like to see them do it," and I kind of give them the structure of how it would work, and they go, "Oh, that's terrific. We love that idea," but then they don't do it necessarily. On the other hand, it's the kind of idea that if I were doing it, they would and proving the concept, then they would want to buy it from me. But still, I want them to do it, and if they don't do it, I'm not going to sell it to the highest bidder, because I think I've had some fabulous ideas, and they're taking them under advisement, and that's their prerogative, because they'll have to invest their money in it. Although if they said, "Well, would you be willing to invest your money in this?" I'd say, "Yeah, this is the kind of stuff that I think this is."
So you're coming back, Dr. Jim? Is that?
Wow, this is how rumors get started.
Okay.
I got the scene from Godfather 3.
So you're saying there's a chance.
Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me. I see that Pacino scene in Godfather.
Thank you, Dr. Beckett. It is always a pleasure. We have your blue M&Ms in the green room, and you are truly a mensch.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dr.
Very honored to be on with you guys.
Well, thank you. We'll play it out. And once again, for everybody else, for our supporters from Center Stage, Waxstat.com, SGC, thank you. And for everybody, episode number 2, thank you.